I would like to take a moment before we get into today's main episode and to talk about my sponsor for the podcast. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page, from to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard. Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who doesn't like to get paid from home? I like to. With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. I have been a part of Podmatch since the beginning of May, and I have got to say that it was the best decision I've ever made because Podmatch helps your podcast grow. It helps you get connected with people that have very interesting, very compelling background stories that are just waiting for their story to be shared. So if you are a host or guest and would like to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, I highly suggest that you sign up with Podmatch today by going to joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to start expanding your network in seconds. I would like to give another huge thank you to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode. Now on to our main episode, and again, you can sign up at joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to begin your podcasting journey today. Alrighty, hello everyone. Welcome to the Lethal Venom podcast, the show where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truths, no lies told. Today I'm joined by a very special guest with me. I'm joined by Mr. Kevin Palmieri. He is what I'd say a successful businessman. He has worked at the stage. He's helped grow a podcast into $1 million plus revenue business. He's recorded well over 3,000 episodes, and he's also been had the opportunity to give hundreds of speeches, trainings, and coaching sessions with people all over the world. He focuses on learning what he didn't know and learning a lot too, and about life starting to shift. He loves talking about consistency, commitment, habits, mindset, confidence, fear, relationships, limiting beliefs, and basically anything and everything in between. Um, but he did go through some hard times. After his rock bottom moment, he went all in on a holistic self improvement, was determined to overcome anxiety, depression, and was finally able to live the life he had always dreamed of. He's now the CSO and founder and host of the Next University podcast, which is a top two global top 100 podcast. He's been a guest on 100 plus podcasts and has received over 280 five-star reviews from podcast shows as a guest on there. So he's had a successful career. So Kevin, thank you so much for coming on here, and I cannot wait to hear this story because it's such a huge and monumental and such a huge inspirational story that I know people are going to love it. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I always regret having my bio set up that way because if I do not know how to speak or I sound bad when I speak, people are going to be like, oh my goodness, he did all of those episodes for nothing. So hopefully we can live up to the powerful introduction we've had today. Thank you so much for having me. No, I'm excited.
From the episodes I've done, I've done about 100 interviews now, and I still screw up on my own talking.
Same,
So,
same. Everybody screws up. That's the first point to touch on is everybody makes mistakes. A lot of people just don't show them.
but you've had such a successful career. I just kind of would like to kind of start at the beginning, just a little bit about what made you start podcasting and how did this dream come to be?
Yeah, I was somebody who had no idea what I wanted to do with my life for most of my life. And I was actually interviewed on a YouTube channel. And the interview was like an hour and a half. And we got to the end of that. And I said it felt like that went by in like 5 minutes. And the fact that we just had a cool conversation was awesome. Imagine if you could do that for a living. Imagine if you could make your job podcasting or speaking or being a YouTuber. And one of my buddies was there and he said, well, there's people out there that do. There's people out there that have channels or podcasts or whatever that find a way to make them their full time job. So I went home that day And I researched and I ordered the equipment and I was off to the races. It was like, oh my goodness, this is something I can actually do. I'm in. This all happened at a time where I had been very quote unquote successful at my real job and I made a lot of money and I had what everybody could assume was success. But I realized that I was living a very unintentional life. I just was living by accident. So it was kind of the perfect storm of me being miserable in my day job, me getting exposure to this thing that was awesome. And then I fell in love with it. I fell in love with podcasting. I fell in love with what you and I are doing together right now, just having cool conversations. But as you know, Noah, at the beginning of the journey, there isn't a line out the door of people saying, Noah, this is a great idea, this podcast. How much money would you like us to give you so you can do this full time? How much would it take? So I had to keep going to this job that I hated, and I was traveling a ton, and I wasn't sleeping, and I was staying up all night. And eventually it got to the place where I was suicidal because of how depressed I was. And I just was dealing with so much stuff internally. So I ended up leaving that job shortly thereafter, that the suicidal ideation, and then we went all in on this. So it was a very weird thing where I feel like I got lucky to find this. Maybe I was better at it than the average person in the beginning. I don't know. But I had a very deep belief that if I could make this my job, it would be the best thing ever of all time. And that's the belief that I hung on to through some really, really challenging times for sure. And now I get to quote unquote live my dreams. But behind the scenes, there are days where things are just brutal and it's not all sunshine and rainbows. And I think it's important to say that because it's easy for me to say I quote unquote made it, but I didn't make it. I still have very big goals that I'm chasing, and I still have days where it's hard to do this. Most days are hard to do this.
A lot of people think podcasting is easy, and it's it's not really easy. I mean, if you have like a whole production team, it is. But when you're these kind of podcasters um that are indie podcasters that don't have the production equipment, that don't have these over expensive microphones, they don't have sold out like rooms as studios,
Mm.
it's hard. I've told everyone my show's all run by me. I do everything. I do the editing, the promoting, the recording, just everything I've done. And it does take a lot of hard work. And I think people think, well, how hard is it to talk into a microphone and post it? Well,
Yeah. This is the easy
it's
part. That's the thing, is this is like the easy part. After this, Noah will have to go through this entire episode and edit to whatever degree Noah decides to, whether we edit out the pauses or whatever it is, add the intro, add the outro, while going through the entire episode, find the clips, come up with the title, do the thumbnail, put it on YouTube. It is a whole thing. Yeah, it is a whole thing. This part is easy in terms of the amount of time. Everything else takes 3 or 4 times the amount of time that we're spending today. So yeah, I understand, right? I thought it was going to be easier than it was, but doing anything at a high level is most likely harder than we probably think, because if we've never done it, we don't really know. We don't really know what to expect.
across the over 1,700 episodes that you've recorded, what's been the biggest thing you've learned
Man,
overall?
probably that some of the people that seem the quote unquote most successful have just overcome so much adversity to get there. I remember we would do interviews, and we interviewed a gentleman. His name's Anthony Trucks. He's played in the NFL, an American Ninja Warrior, just a good dude. Great. He's a professional speaker. And when he was telling his story, he was talking about how he was passed around from foster home to foster home. He had to chase chickens in the backyard to catch dinner. He slept in a dog crate. He was forced to lick the bottom of people's shoes until his tongue bled. And I remember thinking, we're probably never going to hear a story like that again. And the next week, somebody had their own unique version of something similar. And it eventually became obvious that all of these people had every excuse in the world not to keep going and not to be quote unquote successful, but they found a way somehow. And I think at the end of the day, your adversity can be your advantage if you know how to use it. I'm not saying it should be. I'm not saying it always will be. That was a really important lesson. And then I think the other one, and this is like the harder one, every day you are essentially the best you've ever been, but also the worst you'll ever be again. When we recorded our 2000th episode, I went back and listened to episode 1000. And when I recorded episode 1000, I thought I was really good at podcasting. When I listened from this new awareness, it was painful, Noah. It was like, oh my God, I sucked. And that was 1,000 episodes in. When I get to 3,000, I'm probably going to look back at 2,000 and think the same thing. There's something about that lesson that I would never have if I didn't do this as much as I have. So, yeah, that. You might think you're great, and you're probably the greatest you've ever been as long as you're working on it. And if you continue going, you're also the worst you'll ever be again. That's a weird thing to think about.
Kind of going back to what you said about the stories, you think you've heard everything, and then you have a guest come on, and it tops everything that you've heard before.
Mm.
That's happened to me on numerous occasions. I've heard some wacky stories from guests on here, and I think to myself, nothing can over top that. Nothing can be like, oh, this was worse. No one can have it worse than this. And then lo and behold, the next guest I have tops it.
Yeah.
And you kind of went back to a really good question about succeeding in struggles. Is there the possibility that someone can truly succeed without having to have any struggles?
I wish. Yeah, I wish. I don't think so. I think your level of struggle is directly connected to the level of success that you want to have, right? So if Noah, you decide, you know what? I only want to get to 150 podcast episodes. And then I'm okay with it after that. Whatever happens, happens. If I want to get to 1,500 episodes, I'm going to have to struggle more than you because the goal requires more growth than maybe your goal does. So, yeah, no matter what, you're going to have to face resistance in order to get from where you are to where you want to be. The goal dictates how much. If you want to be the best in the world at something, of course your life is going to be way harder than somebody who just wants to be kind of good. Here's a good example. I've taken to golf recently. I like it. I enjoy golf. Am I ever going to be the best in the world? No. I play maybe once a week if I'm lucky. My struggles, my challenge, my dedication is not going to have to be nearly as high as some of the best players in the world, but it most likely will have to be higher than I want it to be. I think that's a really good analogy for life in general. So yes, the goals dictate the struggle, the size of the goals, the distance of the goals, the elevation of the goals dictate how much you're going to have to struggle.
How can someone find their purpose of maybe if they want to get into podcasting, what's something that they have to find to help catapult this career, or and this can just be in general, what can they do to find their purpose in the career choice that they want?
For a lot of people, unfortunately, their purpose comes from pain. Their purpose comes from this happened to me and I really wish it didn't happen to me. And at the time, I didn't have an answer on how to avoid this happening to me. I'm going to help other people avoid the pain that I couldn't. So, one, I think you check in with a couple things. What is your deepest pain that you've had to overcome? And how did you overcome it? What are you the happiest and most fulfilled doing? What about the world pisses you off the most? What about the world excites you the most? Those are all really good places to start. What if people naturally are told you that you're naturally good at? Like, hey, you're really good at this, even though you never tried it before. That's a potential suggestion. But where I think there is a wrinkle in this is there is a drastic difference between a purpose and a vehicle. My purpose is not to be a podcaster. My purpose is to use my voice and use my stories and use my experiences to help people raise their awareness. Podcasting is just the vehicle. So my belief, Noah, is there's a lot of people out there right now that know they want to help a certain person avoid a certain pain in a certain way. But when they say, well, how could I make that profitable? How could I make money doing that? How could I turn that into a job? How could I turn that into a career? They don't have the vehicle yet, and it seems unrealistic. I think that is a really important piece of the conversation. And that's why it's so cool that stuff like this, you can actually make money doing now because the vehicle has shown itself. There's somebody right now who's trying something new and they're going to find a way to make a career out of something that nobody else has. And that will then become a vehicle. So, purpose is the pain you want to solve for a person in a certain type of way. The vehicle is how do you deliver that to the world? I think a lot of people already have an idea of what they want to do. They just don't know what the vehicle is, and it just doesn't seem realistic yet, unfortunately. Unfortunately. And that takes time. That takes time. You got to practice it. You got to practice it and find other people that are using that vehicle and see how they're doing it and see what about that you'd like to do. But it just takes a long time because, in a way, it is a privilege to live in your purpose. It is. It is a privilege to be able to wake up and pour into the world every day. And it's going to be hard to do it, and it's going to take longer than you probably think.
People when it comes to trying to find their purpose lose a lot of confidence, and they kind of get they get let down a lot because it takes forever to find that purpose. It could take years and they lose a lot of confidence in themselves.
Hmm.
What can people do to help them become more confident?
3 simple steps to build confidence. Is it this simple? Maybe not, but in this example, we can make it so. So you state you're going to do something, you prove to yourself that you're capable of doing it, and then you self-assign the credit to you. And the way to do it is to start by stating things that actually seem possible to you. So don't state, I'm going to make $1 million tomorrow. Most likely you're not. I'm not going to make $1 million tomorrow. If I stated that, it's going to end up hurting me. So maybe it's, I am going to journal when I wake up. That's what I'm going to state. Cool. All right, I proved to myself that I could do that by doing that. Awesome. Now, third step, I need to self assign that and give myself the good feelings. Tomorrow, I'm going to say I'm going to do the same thing. So maybe I'm going to journal 1 page. Then after a week, I'm going to journal 2 pages and then 3 pages, then whatever. I think confidence is the same thing. For a lot of us, we have convinced ourselves that we can't do the things that scare us. And we don't feel confident when we think about doing those things. Well, what if we broke those things down into very, 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 very small pieces and we said, I'm going to do it. You actually followed through with it and then you gave yourself credit for it. Podcasting is a great example. You don't have to start by talking to an audience. You can record a video on your phone that nobody's ever going to see and then give yourself the good feelings for doing that. So state you're going to do it, prove to yourself that you're capable of doing it, and then self-assign. But make sure it's something small enough where you'll actually do it. This is why New Year's resolutions don't really work. You're stating, I'm going to lose 200 pounds this year when you don't actually believe it. A good statement would be, I'm going to go to the gym 1 time in the first week of January. Great. And then in the second week, I'll go 2 times. And then you can build from there. So yeah, state proof, self-assign, but make sure it's actually digestible, because if not, you're not going to build confidence. If anything, you're probably going to lose it.
In your opinion, why is it important to have self-awareness?
Ooh. It's very hard to change something that you don't understand. It's very hard to change something that you're not familiar with. So the same reason we take the car to the mechanic, we don't know how to fix it. We don't know what does what. We don't know why it's making a certain noise. I think of myself as that too. I want to make sure I know why I feel certain comfort around certain people. I feel uncomfortable around other people. What role did me not having my father in my life affect? Like, how did that affect me? What role did that play? At the end of the day, I think the more self-awareness you have, the more you understand how the world impacts you. You understand what you're good at. You understand what fulfills you. You understand what makes you sad. You understand where it all came from. So yeah, you understand yourself as the puzzle that you are in a way less complicated way. And I think it gives you way more potential to live a life that you want. Yeah, just like there's a lot of us that understand our cell phone and we understand TikTok and we understand Instagram better than we understand ourselves. You're going to be with yourself for your entire life. So you have to understand why you operate the way you do.
What's something that you've learned now that you wish you had knew earlier in life? Since you've started this career choice and you've become a really successful podcaster, what's been something that you wish you had known prior?
Unfortunately, success makes things harder in a lot of ways. In some ways, it makes it easier. If you're making more money, then you can do things with that money. So I'm not negating that, or I'm not trying to say that doesn't matter. But it's really hard to have a successful relationship, to be consistently in shape, and to grow a business. It's really hard to do all those at the same time. And I thought it would get easier as things grew. In a lot of ways, it's actually more challenging. It's better. The problems are better. The challenges are higher quality. But success does not make life easier unless you are okay with the level that you're at and you're not trying to create more success. That the sustaining of success might be harder than getting it in the first place if you're trying to continue to level up. I wish I knew that sooner because it would have saved me a lot of painful realizations.
Now, you are the host of a very successful podcast, Next Level University, with your friend Alan, which I
Mm-hmm.
actually had the opportunity to interview Alan as well. And he gave such great advice about all this stuff as well. Um, Tell me a little bit about how the Next Level University podcast originated from, and did you ever expect it to actually take off like it has?
Simple answer, no. It started, so it's beautiful that you tied Alan into this because Alan interviewed me on his YouTube channel. And that was when I thought, oh my goodness, I could do this podcast thing. That could be something. So after he interviewed me, he was my first guest on my podcast, which was called the Hyperconscious Podcast. When I was having the suicidal ideations, I reached out to him and he gave me some really good advice and some really good support. When I left my job, him and I said, hey, we both want to do podcasting. We both want to do speaking. Why don't we do this together? We both want to change the world in our own unique way. Let's do this. So we ended up partnering up and we started doing one episode a week. And then we worked really hard and we got guests and all that stuff. Eventually, we were talking to one of our mentors who's now a friend. His name's Evan Carmichael. He said, the name of your podcast is terrible. Nobody knows what hyperconscious means. You got to change your name. So we ended up changing the name to Next Level University. And that was, I guess, the rest is history. But we're two people who are very focused on getting better and improving and getting to the next level. And I want to be a better husband and I want to be a better business owner and I want to be in better shape. I want all the stuff. I want to get to the next level everywhere. And eventually it got to the point where we said, well, we should just do an episode every day on how to help people get to the next level. And that has been, I think we've done an episode every day for the last 4 years now or something. I don't remember. I think it's like 1,500 days. So how many years that is. And it's just become this really big thing. And it's a massive piece of my life. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of. So yeah, it went from this would be fun to I hate my job. Oh my goodness. If there was ever a shot, now is it, to Alan and I partnering up, to oh my goodness, this is terrible, to wow, this is working, to now it's definitely bigger than I ever thought I was going to get for sure. And I'm definitely more quote unquote successful than I ever thought I was going to be. And I'm more fulfilled than I thought I was going to be. So yeah, it has taken on a life of its own to many degrees. And I don't know what the next 5 years are going to hold. It's going to be a surprise to me as much as it is everybody else.
You know, what's been the overall feedback that you've received about the podcast from your listeners, and what's just been some reviews that you've received that have really been kind of rewarding to hear after all the hard work you've put into? What's been some of the feedback you received?
Somebody said this to us yesterday or the day before. They said, I really appreciate the fact that you guys talk about how hard it is, not from a perspective of you can't do it because it's hard, from a perspective of if you want to do it, just FYI, it might be harder than you think. Because I think a lot of people are sugarcoating it and they're not telling the truth. They're making it seem easier than it is. And we don't want to do that. That's a pretty consistent theme. Somebody reached out one time and said, you guys are very heart driven, but you're no BS. And I think that might be the best representation. The only reason I tell the truth is because I care enough to tell the truth. I want people to know. but I don't want to BS it. I want to be honest. I want to tell you what it's gonna really take. So those are always the ones that really, really, really impact us. And we have so many. Alan has a folder on his laptop called his Deepest Why, where he has thousands of screenshots from messages from listeners and clients. And so a lot of those are, hey, I believe in myself more than I ever have. Hey, because of the podcast, I went back to college, even though I didn't think I was smart enough. That type of stuff is what it's all about at the end of the day, because that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to help people get to their own unique next level. So yeah, we've gotten a lot of really awesome, powerful comments, and like any other podcast, we've gotten bad ones too. But that is par for the course.
What's been the most powerful advice that, or what is the most powerful advice that you can give to someone that's maybe in their early stages of being an entrepreneur and they want to kind of help it expand and widen their reach? What advice do you have for those people?
I would say come up with the main three priorities that your focus should go in. So in the beginning, we tend to just do a lot of stuff. When in reality, if you pick three lanes and you go all in on those three lanes and stay hyper focused on those three lanes, if I focused on being a podcaster and like a podcast coach and a podcast speaker sooner on, I'd be way more successful for sure. I just didn't know that. That's one. The second thing is consistency is no longer a strategy, it is a necessity. You have to be consistent just to play the game. But if you take consistency and every time, let's say every time you do an episode, you say, okay, what was the most important win? What was the most important improvement? You take the win and you make sure you do more of that. You take the improvement, you try your best to make sure that doesn't happen again. You do that for 50 episodes, you do that for 100 episodes, you're going to be more successful. And as an entrepreneur, same thing. What went well about this coaching call? What went well about this landscaping job we got? Okay, where can we improve? If you do that for a long period of time, you are going to be more successful than a lot of people, because a lot of people just say, okay, it's going to happen. Now that it's happening, let's just keep doing it. They're not really as focused on improving. That if you do that long enough, you can be really, really, really successful. And if you're hearing this now and you're just starting as an entrepreneur, if you can do that from the very beginning, you're going to see a difference between you and people similar to you within first 6 months, probably.
If you hadn't had gone along or gone down this path of being a podcaster or anything, do you have an idea of maybe what where you would be now if you had not picked up podcasting as a career?
I very honestly, no, I could be dead because I think my mental health was in such a bad space that this saved my life in many ways, honestly. Outside of that, I don't know. I don't know. I like writing music, but I don't think I ever would have started recording music until I podcasted for long enough. So I probably would have got some sort of manual labor job like HVAC or something like that. And that probably would have been it, I would guess. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Shout out to you if you do HVAC or anything like that. But yeah, that's probably that. Some sort of manual labor job where I probably would not have enjoyed it, and I probably would have wished that I had the courage to do the thing that I really, really, really wanted to do.
What's been your biggest fear that you've had, and how have you been able to overcome it?
This is always a challenging one to answer because my biggest fear is failure. And the way I've been able to overcome it is by failing in very, very small bouts over the last 8 years. So, one of my biggest fears was bombing a speech and not doing well and forgetting what to say. It was only after that happened that I realized one, it's not the end of the world. And two, there's so many lessons in that to avoid that happening again. It's almost like until your greatest fear happens, you don't know how you'd react and you don't know what your response is. Now, again, I'm talking about very unserious fears, right? Failure. I'm not talking about the death of a loved one or something like that. I understand that's different. But yeah, it's almost like you kind of have to microdose whatever your greatest fear is. If you're afraid of snakes, that's the greatest fear. You're either going to decide you're going to be afraid of snakes forever, or you're going to create exposure to the thing you're afraid of in very, very small doses until the point where you're not that afraid of it anymore. And you can do that with anything. Heights, there's a bunch of stuff. It's called exposure therapy for a reason, right? So failure, and I got over it to the degree I have by going through my own little unique case of exposure therapy by facing fear and facing rejection along the way to the point now where it doesn't affect me as much as it did, but I still don't like making mistakes and I still don't like disappointing people. I just am able to deal with it a little bit better than I was in the past.
What advice do you have for people that maybe they're listening to this and maybe they want to try to take up a career in podcasting? What's some easy tips that they can take and start today of how they can help build their podcast brand and have a successful podcast show?
I would say focus on solving a very unique problem. You don't want to be for everyone. That's probably the best way to put it. I know it's easy to see some of the most successful podcasts. It's like, well, they talk to all sorts of people all the time. They are the anomalies. Do not try to do what they're doing. Just because they're the successful ones does not mean their recipe is the recipe. It doesn't mean that. And in many cases, it actually means the opposite. Because to your point, Noah, a good example, one of my favorite YouTube shows is called Hot Ones. Have you ever seen Hot Ones?
I have.
Great show. And
Mhm.
shout out to Sean Evans. He does great interviews. That was not a grassroots indie thing. That was backed by a very, very successful company who had artists that they could have on the show. That was not, oh my goodness, we have a good idea. Let's grind it out for 5 years. That's not the way it worked. They had backing and they had money and they had connections that a lot of us don't have. So we can't play the game the same exact way that they're playing that game because we don't know how they started. So, one, find your unique voice and find your unique delivery and solve problems for somebody in a very unique way. And when I say solve problems, I'm not saying it has to be a personal development podcast. A sports talk show solves problems, comedy solves problems. It's just different problems. That's that. Two, understand that what you do before and after the podcast are just as important as what you do on the podcast. I know a lot of really good podcasters who nobody has ever heard of because what you do on the microphone is not everything, going back to what we said at the beginning. Marketing it right, getting on other shows, making sure your guests are aligned, making sure that you're getting to know your audience. So there's a lot that goes into it that is way beyond just this part. And then the last thing I would say is become obsessed with figuring out who your audience is and understand that at the end of the day, if you only have 15 listeners, that's a really good problem to have because it's way easier to find 15 people than it is 150. Make yourself available, make yourself accessible, and have conversations with your audience because you're going to learn so much about what they like, to your point, what they don't like, what they're learning, who they are, what their problems are. And then you can do more episodes based on what you hear from your audience. So those are a few simple ones. Get a little bit better every time. Don't cheap out on everything to the degree that you can, right? I'm not saying you got to go buy a $500 microphone. I'm not saying that. But you can get a $30 microphone that's better than none. Just incrementally improve as you go.
Yeah, the thing with podcasting is same thing as going viral on social media. You never quite understand or know when your podcast will take off.
Mm.
You could make 80 episodes and they might get a few downloads or streams. And then the next episode you post could be something just very generic and brand about maybe talking about how childhood was like for you. And that episode could blow up and you get 100 like thousands hundreds and thousands of worth of downloads and streams and you gain a lot of followers and support from that. You can't plan when this will blow up. I don't want people to feel discouraged when if they start a podcast, they don't get the numbers that they want to right away because as you've heard Kevin said, and even from what when I interviewed Alan, he said this wasn't like an overnight success thing.
Mm-mm.
It was this, yeah, they get they've had millions of people listen to them. They're available and have been heard in 180 countries. That all did not happen overnight.
No.
That took years and years of hard work and dedication. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand. And I think a lot of podcasters think that they're going to get that their first episode. And when they notice that it's not going to be that easy to get it, they are like, oh, well, then I'm not going to do it no more.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So,
it took eight years, Noah, right? 8 years. I've been doing this full time. I guess 7 years full time, 1 year part time, I guess. But eight, I mean, that's a long freaking time. And I traded in so much for this. I couldn't afford Christmas presents for my wife. I couldn't pay rent. I couldn't get us dinner. I mean, I dedicated everything. I traded in everything to get here, and it was brutal. It was really, really, really bad. We were talking about this yesterday. We have a group coaching program. In the first 2 years in business, I think we made like $14,000, something like that. And there was two of us, so that was $7,000 a piece, split over 2 years. Not enough to live in New England for sure. Over the last 2 years, so this year and last year, I think we made 70 times that. And it's not about, I'm not talking, don't even think about the money. It's not about the money. It's about how the first 2 years almost nothing happens. And then as you continue going and when you do it long enough, you'll have a year where you had more success than 5 years prior. But
mhm.
if you stop in year two, you never see that. So that's a really weird thing that I'm starting to see, which is strange, is we've had more success over the last 2 years than we did the previous 6, which is wild to think of. But to your point, none of this has been overnight. It's been every day, right? For the last 8 years.
Yeah, I started my show back in February, but even before then, the podcast went through very much a development. It was a development hell, is what I like to say. It's like how movies are. It was kind of in like development hell where they get like an idea and it takes years and years and years to finally get thing. That's how this show was.
Mm,
It was a 4 year process trying to get this show finally up and going. And once I did post, the only people and streams that I was probably getting were from this like from my friends that were on social that I had on social media. That was it first.
mm,
Now it's weird that over 6 months, how much 6 months has changed. Now I've had kind of worldwide listens from here. Now, granted, I don't have thousands and thousands and thousands of streams, but it's slowly starting to add up to it quickly.
mm.
But the but the main message is I didn't get this all overnight.
Yes. And nobody will. No, that is such a rarity. It's going to happen to people, and then you're going to see it on social media, and you're going to think it's normal. It is rare. Social media is. I don't know if we're fully capable of understanding what social media is doing to our brains yet. That's a different conversation.
Yeah, but if you do have that chance where you do get viral overnight, it's one of those rare things
Yes.
that you're just lucky. And it's like you
Yes.
have a God gift. That's when you go sign up for the lottery. Is when
Yes. 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 Yes.
if you get success like that overnight for that, you're more likely to get the lottery after that. So,
Yes.
you know, I think the podcast you and Alan do is just so inspiring because I think a lot of people have learned so much from you guys, and it's such a great business and great podcast that you guys have. But a lot of people probably still have other questions about podcasting and maybe entrepreneurship and business and how to grow. And as someone that didn't study that, I'm not the best person. So if my audience is listening and they have questions about podcasting that they kind of want to have a deeper dive in, or maybe if they need some more advice on business and stuff, what's the best way that they can get in touch with you? And what other stuff do you have going on for the podcast that you can share with my audience as well as just kind of promote everything you got going on?
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. So I actually do a podcast about podcasts called Podcast Growth University, a free podcast. I do an episode every week on how to grow, scale, and monetize. So that's a great free option. We have a group coaching program where we actually take people through to help them create the habits, the strategies, and like the business model in order to grow, scale, and monetize their podcast. That's something we do every quarter. There's another one starting in October. Man. And then like for Next Level University, there's an episode every day that's free. We have a free Facebook group. We have a free book club. We do free monthly master classes. There is a bunch of free stuff. So there is an opportunity to get a little bit better every day, a little bit better every week, a little bit better every month. There is a bunch of resources. All of that stuff is on the website, nextleveluniverse.com. And then if you have questions for me specifically, just email me. My email is kevin@nextleveluniverse.com. I'm happy to answer any questions you got about podcasting, business, whatever. Anything I can do to add value, I am just a message away.
And I'll put all of his links in the description box. I'll put the website. I'll put links to his podcast on there, the podcasting one as well as the Next Level University one. So if you are more interested in checking that out, you can have easy access to kind of take you directly to that. And I'll also put his email and social media accounts down there as well for people if they would like to connect with him and maybe have questions. I make it real easy. I put all those links down there for that.
Thank you.
So it's all easy access for my listeners to find. So feel free to, and I highly suggest you, if there's anyone that you need to have advice on podcasting, I think Kevin's one of the
Thank
best
you, my
and
friend. I appreciate it.
one of the most highly professional ones out there. So if he knows it, if you need anyone that knows about podcasting, Kevin's one of those people. It's
Thank you. I
He
appreciate it.
knows that. You can also follow me on social media as well. Instagram and TikTok at Lethal Venom Podcast, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. It's Noah's Podcast. I do post this generic social media stuff on there about the podcast teasers and just upcoming information about upcoming episodes. And also feel free to listen to Lethal Venom wherever you get your podcasts from. It's on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Pandora. It's everywhere. So feel free to follow the podcast on there to get notified of when new episodes come out. Following, I know doesn't probably mean anything, but it actually does kind of help get the show out there and kind of helps it grow. So if you want to follow it, you're more than welcome to. If you don't, that's totally okay. Just you listening to it's all I really care about. But I appreciate the Kevin and a big thank you to him for coming on here and sharing this. And hopefully my listeners, you all enjoyed today's episode. Y'all all have a great rest of your day and week. Be safe, make good decisions, and I'll see you all in the next episode of Lethal Venom.